Your wife checked in with her husband. Her husband?
I'm her real husband. This is just business.
Then why does his keycard say spouse access?
The reservation shows Mrs. Elise Carter is already upstairs with her husband, Mr. Adrian Vale. The front desk clerk said it politely, the way hotel staff are trained to say impossible things without changing their face. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I stood in the marble lobby of the Aurelia Grand Hotel in New York City, holding a bouquet of white orchids in one hand and a small velvet anniversary box in the other. Behind the clock, crystal chandeliers glowed above polished brass counters. A pianist played near the lounge. Guests in designer coats moved past me toward elevators that required private keycards. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked calm. Except my chest. My wife's name is Elise Carter, I said carefully. I'm her husband. The clerk's smile weakened. She looked down at her screen again, then back at me. I'm sorry, sir. The reservation is under Mrs. Elise Carter and Mr. Adrian Vale. It notes anniversary stay. Penthouse level, spouse access approved. Spouse access. The words hit harder than any scream could have. I looked at the orchids in my hand. White orchids were Elise's favorite. She once told me they looked like they belonged in places where people spoke softly and never worried about money. I had ordered them 3 days earlier because she told me she would be in New York for a hospitality investment meeting, and I wanted to surprise her for our 10th anniversary. 10 years. A decade of marriage, sacrifice, silent support, and nights when I believed her ambition was something I was helping protect. And now a stranger behind a hotel desk was telling me another man had already been given my place. The clerk lowered her voice. Would you like me to call the suite? Before I could answer, the elevator doors opened across the lobby. Elise stepped out. She wore a black silk dress under a cream coat, her hair swept back, diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. Beside her was a tall man in a charcoal overcoat. His hand rested lightly at her lower back. Not aggressively, naturally, like it belonged there. She laughed at something he said. Then she saw me. The laugh died on her face. The orchids suddenly felt heavy. The man beside her looked from me to the flowers, then to Elise, and his expression did not show surprise. That told me everything. He knew who I was. Elise walked toward me slowly, her heels clicking across the marble floor. Caleb, she said, what are you doing here? I looked at her, then at him. I came to surprise my wife. Her eyes hardened, not with guilt, but with irritation. The man extended his hand like we were meeting at a business dinner. Adrian Vale. I didn't take it. The clerk behind me whispered, Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry. He said he was your husband. Elise closed her eyes for half a second. Then she opened them and said the sentence that changed everything. Caleb, don't make a scene. This hotel is important to me. She had no idea how important it was to me. Because 5 years before she ever stepped into that penthouse, my name had been placed inside the ownership papers of the Aurelia Grand. And what I found that night proved Adrian was not just pretending to be her husband. He was helping her erase the real one. My name is Caleb Morgan. I was 44 years old when a hotel clerk introduced my wife's betrayal to me in the language of hospitality. Not shouting, not accusation, just a reservation record. Mrs. Elise Carter and her husband, Mr. Adrian Vale. I lived in Philadelphia most of my adult life, though my work took me into old buildings across the country. I was a restoration engineer. That sounds more polished than it feels. Most days, it meant crawling under century-old floors, reading structural reports, negotiating with contractors, saving historic places rich people wanted to modernize without understanding what held them up. I was never the man in front of the camera. I was the man behind the walls. My father was a carpenter. My mother cleaned offices after hours. They both believed in work that lasted longer than applause. My father used to run his hand along old wood and say, Son, the strongest parts of a building are usually the parts nobody photographs. I carried that line into everything. My work, my marriage, my life. For most of my marriage, I believed love was similar to restoration. You preserved what mattered. You reinforced what was weak. You did not tear down a wall just because the paint had cracked. I believed if you loved someone patiently enough, they would eventually notice the beams you kept from breaking. I was wrong. Elise and I met at a charity auction for historic hotels. She was 32 then, sharp, elegant, and hungry in the way people are when they grew up close enough to luxury to want it, but not close enough to own it. She had a small boutique hospitality consulting firm and a dream of building a brand around forgotten luxury properties. I understood old buildings. She understood rooms full of money. That was how we began. She could make investors imagine velvet ropes, rooftop lounges, private suites, brand partnerships, celebrity openings. I could look at a cracked foundation and tell you whether that dream would collapse in 2 years. For a while, that partnership felt perfect. She made everything look possible. I made sure possible did not become dangerous. I reviewed hotel inspections, introduced her to property owners, negotiated contractor costs, and once spent 3 months saving a hotel restoration budget that would have bankrupted her company if the wrong elevator clause stayed hidden. She thanked me then. She used to say, "Caleb, you see what everyone else misses." Later, that became the thing she resented. Because when people want to lie, they start hating the person who notices details. Our marriage started in small places, not luxury ones. A narrow apartment above a dry cleaner in Philadelphia. 1 bedroom. 1 window that stuck in winter. A kitchen table that served as office, dining room, and argument space. Elise would sit there with her laptop open, building pitch decks for boutique hotel investors, while I spread blueprints across the floor because the table was too small for both our dreams. She would ask me questions all night. Can this old hotel be saved? Would this renovation cost too much? Is this contractor lying to me? Would investors believe this? Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes no. Sometimes I told her the truth she didn't want. And she loved me for it because back then truth still felt like protection. When she landed her first real client, a small historic in outside Savannah, she cried in our apartment hallway. She had been rejected by 12 investors that month. I still remember her pressing her forehead against my chest and whispering, "You believed before they did." I did believe. I believed when her bank account was negative. I believed when she borrowed my car for client meetings because Hayes wouldn't start. I believed when her mother told her she should have married a man with a better ceiling. That comment stayed between us for years, though Elise pretended it didn't. Her mother, Vivian, was a woman who measured people by proximity to wealth. She liked me when I helped Elise, but she never respected me. She called me practical in the tone other people use for small. At first, Elise defended me. Then her business grew, and slowly, she stopped defending what no longer flattered the image she wanted. The first sign was language. Our plan became my brand. Our risk became my sacrifice. Our contacts became my network. I told myself it was branding. Investors preferred confidence. Luxury required a strong story. Maybe we sounded too soft when millionaires were listening. Then came the hotels. 5-star lobbies. Private lounges. Investor dinners. Rooftop tastings. Elise began spending more nights away. She said luxury deals happened after hours, over champagne, in places where people signed checks because they felt important. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. At home, she started moving like a guest. Her suitcase never fully unpacked. Her phone stayed face down. Her perfume changed. Her laughter became something I heard more often on calls than across our own kitchen. When I asked if everything was okay, she smiled without warmth. "Caleb, you worry like a contractor." At dinners, she began introducing me differently. "This is my husband. He does restoration work. Not partner. Not the man who helped build her first client list. Restoration work. Like I patched walls for a living." I swallowed it because correcting your wife in front of investors feels like making yourself the problem. And that is how distance wins. Not with one slammed door, with one swallowed sentence at a time. By the time I went to that hotel with orchids in my hand, I had already lost more than I wanted to admit. I just didn't know she had given my name to someone else. Elise had told me she would be in New York for 3 nights. "Big opportunity," she said, standing in our bedroom while packing a black suitcase. "Aurelia Grand. Private hospitality group. If this goes right, I may finally get a controlling role in a luxury property." Her voice lifted when she said it. Controlling role. That had become her favorite dream. Not partnership. Control. I asked, "Do you want me there?" She didn't even look up from folding a silk blouse. "No, this is investor-facing. Technical details won't come up." Technical details. That was what she called my world when she no longer wanted me in hers. Our 10th anniversary was that Friday. She knew it. She said we would celebrate when she came home. But something in me refused to let the day pass like a calendar note she could move around. So I booked a train to New York. I ordered white orchids. I bought a small necklace with an emerald pendant because emerald was the stone in her original engagement ring before she upgraded it to a diamond. I was not trying to catch her. I was trying to reach her. That is the part betrayal makes embarrassing afterward. The kindness you brought with you becomes evidence of how little you knew. The Aurelia Grand stood on Madison Avenue, a historic hotel wrapped in limestone and brass. I knew the building well. Years earlier, I had helped restore part of its east wing after a private equity group nearly ruined it with cheap structural shortcuts. The old owner, Mr. Bellamy, could not pay my full fee at the time, so he gave my firm a small equity position and approval rights tied to future sale or redevelopment. Elise knew the story. She used to joke that I owned a romantic little piece of a rich building. I never talked about it much because I did not think of it as power. I thought of it as respect between men who cared about old structures. When I walked into the lobby that night, I felt nervous in a foolish, hopeful way. I imagined Elise surprised, maybe emotional, maybe embarrassed that she had almost let our anniversary pass under business pressure. The front desk clerk greeted me. I gave her Elise's name. She typed, smiled, and asked, "Are you joining Mrs. Carter in the penthouse?" "Yes," I said. "I'm her husband." That was when her fingers paused. She looked at the screen again. Then she said, "The reservation shows Mrs. Elise Carter is already upstairs with her husband, Mr. Adrian Vale." I remember every sound after that. The piano, a suitcase wheel crossing marble, ice shaking in a cocktail glass from a lounge. My own heartbeat, suddenly too loud. I said, "There must be a mistake." The clerk's face tightened with professional panic. Before she could answer, the elevator opened. Elise stepped out with Adrian, his hand at her back, her smile on his face. For 10 years, I had imagined many ways a marriage could suffer. I had never imagined being corrected by a hotel record. Elise walked toward me, not with guilt, but calculation. "Caleb," she said, "this is not a good time." I looked at Adrian. "Apparently it's your anniversary too." His face hardened. Elise lowered her voice. "Don't do this, hey." "Do what?" "Act wounded in public." That sentence almost made me laugh because wounded was exactly what she had made me. She just hated that other people might see the blood. The clerk placed a key envelope on the counter, and my eyes caught one printed line before she pulled it back. Vale Carter Hospitality Acquisition Weekend. Not anniversary stay. Acquisition weekend. Adrian saw me notice it. Elise did too. And in that instant, I understood this was bigger than cheating. She had brought another man to a hotel I partly owned, registered him as her husband, and connected his name to a deal she had not told me existed. That night, I left the orchids on the front desk. Then I walked out into the cold Manhattan rain, no longer trying to save my anniversary. I was trying to understand what else my wife had replaced. I walked 6 blocks in the rain before I realized I was still holding the velvet jewelry box. The orchids were gone, left behind like something foolish. But the emerald necklace was still in my coat pocket, pressed against my palm so tightly the corners marked my skin. I did not call Elise. I did not follow her upstairs. I did not ask the front desk for a scene I could not undo. I found a quiet hotel bar across the street and sat in the corner where I could see the Aurelia's entrance through the window. People kept entering under black umbrellas, stepping into warmth, light, and polished service. I ordered coffee, not whiskey. I wanted my mind clear. For almost an hour, I replayed the front desk clerk's words. Her husband, Mr. Adrian Vale. Spouse access approved. Acquisition weekend. Those were not the words of an affair alone. Those were administrative words. System words. Someone had entered them. Someone had confirmed them. Someone had attached them to the reservation. And systems do not betray by accident. People do. At 10:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Elise. I watched her name glow on the screen. Then a text appeared. You embarrass me tonight. Go home. We'll talk Sunday. I stated the message. Not I'm sorry. Not let me explain. Go home. That was the first evidence of where her heart had moved. She was not afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control of the room. I forwarded the text to myself, then took a screenshot. Something in me had shifted into record-keeping mode. Not revenge. Preservation. My father's voice came back to me. The strongest parts of a building are usually the parts nobody photographs. That night, I started photographing everything. The next morning, I went to the County Property Records office near Center Street. The Aurelia Grand's ownership history was complicated, led through holding companies, restoration trusts, and redevelopment agreements. I knew enough to search the old Bellamy restoration file. My firm's equity rights were still there. Morgan Structural and Restoration LLC. Minority equity position. Protective approval rights on transfer, sale, redevelopment, and branding control. Then I saw a recent filing request. Vale Carter Hospitality Group had requested due diligence on a transfer option connected to the hotel. Vale Carter, Adrian Vale, Elise Carter, together. Not lovers hiding in a room, partners creating a company name. My stomach tightened. I printed the filing request. Then I found the first document that proved planning. A draft spousal consent form. It listed Elise Carter as married. But the spouse line did not have my name. It had Adrian Vale. Someone had treated him not only as a husband in the hotel system, but as her spouse for deal optics. The form was unsigned, but the intention was loud. I sat outside the records office in a cold stone courtyard, holding papers that made my marriage look like an outdated record waiting to be corrected. I still loved her. That was the shameful part. Even after the hotel, even after the text, even after seeing another man's name where mine belonged. A part of me still wanted an explanation that would hurt less than the truth. But love cannot be allowed to overrule evidence. That was only the first document. The next one told me this had been planned for months. I called the only person I trusted with documents that could destroy a room without raising his voice. Graham Ellis. Graham was my attorney, 68 years old, brown-skinned, bald, and precise in the way surgeons are precise. He had represented my firm for more than a decade. He did not enjoy drama. He enjoyed enforceable language. When I walked into his office with a hotel registration note, the county filing, and the spousal consent draft, he read everything twice. Then he looked at me and said, "Caleb, your wife is not only having an affair." I sat across from him, already knowing the next words would hurt. "She's trying to replace you inside a transaction." That was the first twist. Adrian was not just her lover. He was a legal substitute. Graham opened the Aurelia agreement from his archive. Mr. Bellamy's signature was still there. Mine too. "Your restoration equity was small at the time," Graham said. "But this protective approval clause is not small. Any sale, transfer, redevelopment, or brand conversion requires your written approval." I leaned forward. "Elise knows that." "Yes," he said. "Which means Adrian probably knows that too." The second twist arrived from an unexpected person. A front desk supervisor named Nina called me from a private number. She had gotten my contact from the old Bellamy file because my fame was still listed in hotel ownership archives. Her voice was careful. "Mr. Morgan, I may lose my job for calling you." "Why call?" "Because I saw your face last night," she said. "And because the reservation was changed manually." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Carter originally booked the penthouse under her own name. 2 days before arrival, Mr. Adrian Vale was added as spouse. Then a VIP note was added. Refer to Mr. Vale as husband for investor privacy. Investor privacy. That phrase was so polished it almost hid the rot. Nina sent me a screenshot of the audit trail with no guest-sensitive data beyond names and timestamps. The change had been requested by Elise's assistant. That was the third twist. Elise did not make one careless lie at the front desk. She instructed staff to support it. The fourth twist came from the hotel folio. Room service for 2. Champagne. A late-night tailor. A private notary fee. The notary fee mattered. Graham tracked the notary name by afternoon. The notary had been scheduled for the penthouse suite on Friday morning, the day after I arrived. Then Graham found the draft document. Spousal acknowledgement and non-objection to hospitality acquisition participation. This time, the spouse field had been corrected. Caleb Morgan. My name was there, and beneath it was a blank signature line. I stayed at it until Graham said, "They were going to ask you to sign something later or forge a packet showing you had no objection." Why use Adrian as husband at the hotel then? Because in investor-facing rooms, perception becomes momentum. If everyone sees Adrian as her husband, your objection looks like personal bitterness from a man being replaced. That was a fifth twist. They were building two realities. One for legal papers, where my name still mattered. One for public rooms, where Adrian had already taken my place. Then my bank sent an alert. A joint line of credit Elise and I had opened years earlier for business emergencies had been accessed. Not heavily, just enough to pay a $42,000 deposit to Vail Carter Hospitality Group. I had not authorized it. Graham's jaw tightened when he saw it. Now we have financial misuse. By evening, another message came from Nina. A deleted concierge note had been recovered. Mrs. Carter requests no calls from Mr. Caleb Morgan be transferred to penthouse. Direct all inquiries to Mr. Vail. I sat in my apartment that night with the printed evidence spread across the table. Hotel audit trail. County filing. Spousal consent draft. Notary fee. Line of credit transfer. Concierge note. Every page was another brick in a wall Elise had been building between me and my own life. And the most painful part was not that she had lied. It was realizing how many systems had accepted the lie because she looked like someone who belonged in luxury and I looked like someone who restored it from underneath. So let me ask you something. If you walked into a hotel to surprise your wife and found out another man was registered as her husband, what would you do? Would you storm upstairs? Would you confront them in the penthouse? Would you call her mother, her assistant, every investor in that building, and expose the lie before they could explain it away? I wanted to. I wanted to walk back into the Aurelia Grand, take the elevator to the penthouse, and make Adrian look me in the eye. I wanted Elise to say the truth without the protection of polished marble, concierge notes, and investor language. But Graham told me something that stopped me. Do not fight the performance. Find the paperwork behind it. That sentence saved me from giving them exactly what they needed. If I shouted, I would become the jealous husband. If I threatened Adrian, I would become unstable. If I begged Elise in the lobby, I would become small. And if I confronted them too early, they would change the documents before I could prove what they had already tried to do. So I stayed quiet. Not because I was calm inside. I was not. Inside, I was standing in a burning room. But I had spent my whole career restoring old buildings. I knew something about fire damage. You do not swing blindly through smoke. You find the source. You protect the exits. You stop the structure from falling. That became my plan. No shouting. No begging. No public breakdown. Evidence first. Truth second. Because what Elise did next proved she was not trying to hide an affair. She was trying to turn the affair into a business arrangement and leave me holding the emotional damage like it was the only damage that mattered. The next morning, Graham took me to an old file storage room beneath his office. I had forgotten he kept physical copies of major agreements there. Most lawyers had moved everything digital, but Graham trusted paper because servers could be hacked, deleted, or accidentally migrated. He pulled a gray archive box from a shelf and set it on the table. Aurelia Grand, Bellamy Restoration Equity. The label alone made my throat tighten. Mr. Bellamy had been the old owner of the Aurelia, a widower with shaking hands and fierce pride. When I first met him, the hotel was bleeding money. Developers wanted to gut it, flatten its character, and turn it into another glass luxury box with no soul. I helped save the East Wing, the ballroom ceiling, the brass elevator frames, and the old rooftop garden. Mr. Bellamy could not pay my full fee, so he gave me equity and approval rights. He said, "You preserve my wife's favorite place. I will make sure your name is preserved in it too." I had not thought of that sentence in years. Graham opened the original agreement and pointed to the clause. Morgan Structural and Restoration LLC retains approval rights over any sale, brand conversion, redevelopment, or controlling interest transfer affecting the Aurelia Grand Hotel. My name, my firm, my rights. This, Graham said, is why they need you quiet. I looked at him. Because without my approval, they cannot convert the hotel into Vale Carter's flagship. Correct. And if I object, the acquisition stalls. The investor dinner becomes theater. Their financing gets questioned. I sat back. For days, I had felt like a husband being replaced. Now I understood I was also a rights holder being bypassed. Graham then opened a second file. Elise's assistant requested a copy of this clause 8 months ago. My stomach turned. 8 months. Yes. That meant the betrayal did not begin in the hotel lobby. It began when Elise learned my signature could stop her luxury dream. Graham slid another document toward me. Here's the event schedule for tomorrow night. Rooftop acquisition reception. Vale Carter Hospitality Group will announce its partnership to acquire and rebrand the Aurelia. I read the page. Elise Carter and Adrian Vale, co-founding partners. Co-founding partners. Not husband and wife, but close enough for investors to read what they wanted. Graham said, the rooftop is where they plan to create public momentum. Once announced, they will pressure you privately to sign a non-objection. They will frame refusal as emotional retaliation. I looked at the window. New York moved below us, loud and indifferent. What do we do? Graham closed the file. We attend. She won't let me in. You do not need her permission. You are listed as a protected equity rights holder. He paused, then added, and Nina is willing to testify to the reservation change if needed. I stayed at him. Why would she risk that? Because she said hotels are built on service, not lies. That almost broke me more than Elise's betrayal. A stranger understood the difference. My own wife had chosen not to. Before I left, Graham handed me a slim black folder. Inside were copies of the Bellamy Agreement, the reservation audit, the notary record, the line of credit transfer, and the rooftop event schedule. Caleb, he said, she thinks you are walking into that hotel as a humiliated husband. I looked down at the documents. She's wrong. Yes, he said. You are walking in as the man whose approval they forgot still matters. The rooftop reception began at 7. By then, the Aurelia Grand had transformed itself into a stage. The lobby glowed with fresh flowers, brass lamps, and staff moving with quiet urgency. Near the elevators, a sign pointed invited guests toward the rooftop garden, where Vale Carter Hospitality Group was hosting what the invitation called a private acquisition celebration. Private. That word almost made me smile. Nothing about betrayal stays private once paperwork starts talking. I wore a dark suit and carried Graham's black folder in my left hand. Graham walked beside me, calm as stone, wearing a charcoal overcoat. We entered through the main lobby, not the service entrance. I wanted Elise to see me arrive through the same doors where she had let another man replace me. Nina stood near the front desk. She saw me and gave the smallest nod. Not dramatic, just enough. The elevator ride to the rooftop felt longer than it was. Through the glass wall, the city rose around us in towers of light. I could see my reflection beside Graham's, and for a second, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, because I was not carrying flowers this time. When the elevator opened, warm air from rooftop heaters met us. The garden was covered in white tents and glass lanterns. Investors stood in small groups with champagne. A string quartet played near the bar. Beyond the terrace edge, Manhattan glittered like it had no interest in anyone's heartbreak. Elise stood near the center of the rooftop beside Adrian. She wore a silver dress and a white coat draped over her shoulders. Adrian stood close, one hand in his pocket, smiling as if he had already purchased the future. Vivian, Elise's mother, was there too, speaking to guests like she had been born into old money instead of chasing it her whole life. Then Elise saw me. The smile on her face stayed in place, but her eyes changed. Adrian noticed and turned. Vivian stopped mid-sentence. Graham leaned toward me and said quietly, "Let them speak first." A small platform had been set near the rooftop garden fountain. On it was a microphone and a covered easel, probably hiding a rendering of the rebranded hotel. Adrian stepped up first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, lifting his glass, "tonight is about legacy, vision, and partnership. Elise stood beside him. Partnership. That word moved through me like a blade. Adrian continued. The Aurelia Grand has always represented timeless luxury. But with the right leadership, it can become something even greater. I looked at the brass elevator doors, the restored rooftop tiles, the old stone edge Mr. Bellamy had once touched with tears in his eyes. Greater. That was how men like Adrian justified erasing history. Elise took the microphone. Her voice was smooth. This hotel represents everything I have worked toward. Elegance, reinvention, control over the future. Then she looked directly at me, only for half a second, but I saw the warning in it. Do not ruin this. She smiled at the crowd. Tonight, we begin the next chapter. Adrian reached for the cloth covering the easel. Graham opened his folder. I took one step forward. Then Elise saw the first page. Her eyes dropped to the black folder in my hand. At first, Elise looked annoyed. Then Graham removed the first document, and annoyance became recognition. The Bellamy Restoration Equity Agreement. She knew that page. She had requested it 8 months earlier. Adrian pulled the cloth from the easel, revealing a polished rendering of the Aurelia Grand with a new name across the entrance. Vale Carter House. The crowd clapped. I did not. Graham stepped forward and spoke clearly. Before this announcement proceeds any further, my client is formally objecting to any sale, brand conversion, or redevelopment of the Aurelia Grand Hotel. The applause faded unevenly. Adrian lowered his glass. Elise's smile tightened. Caleb, she said, still near the microphone. This is not the time. I looked at her. You said that in the lobby too. A few guests glanced between us. Adrian stepped forward. This is a private event. Graham turned to him. It is a transaction event involving a property subject to my client's recorded approval rights. The investors began listening differently. Money always does. Graham handed copies to 2 men near the front who looked like legal counsel. This agreement grants Morgan Structural and Restoration LLC approval rights over sale, transfer, redevelopment, and brand conversion involving the Aurelia Grand. No conversion to Vale Carter House can proceed without written approval from Caleb Morgan. Adrian's jaw tightened. That agreement is outdated. Graham replied. It was reaffirmed in the latest county property records. Elise spoke quickly. Caleb is my husband. This is a personal matter. There it was. The switch. In the lobby. Adrian was husband. On the rooftop. I became husband again because my rights were inconvenient. I looked at the guests, then back at her. Funny how that changes depending on which document is on the table. The words landed hard. Vivian moved toward Elise, whispering something, but Elise ignored her. Graham opened the next document. This is the reservation audit from the Aurelia Grand. 2 days ago, Mr. Adrian Vale was added to Mrs. Carter's penthouse reservation as spouse, with an internal note instructing staff to refer to him as husband for investor privacy. A ripple moved through the rooftop. Adrian's face darkened. Elise said, that was a misunderstanding. Nina stepped forward from near the service entrance. Her voice shook, but she spoke. It was not. The change was requested manually through Mrs. Carter's assistant. Elise stared at her. Nina, you don't understand what you're doing. Nina lifted her chin. I understand hotel records. That sentence did more damage than shouting. Graham continued. This is the draft spousal consent form connected to acquisition participation. In one version, Mr. Vale is treated as spouse for hotel-facing access. In another version, Caleb Morgan's name appears on the legal non-objection form. An investor near the front frowned. Why 2 spouse identities? No one answered. So I did. Because one man was useful in public, and the other was still needed on paper. Elise's face went pale. Adrian said, this is emotional manipulation. I looked at him. No. Emotional manipulation is checking into a penthouse with another man under his spouse note on my 10th anniversary, then telling me not to make a scene. The rooftop froze around that sentence. Not silent. Frozen. Elise's mother whispered, Elise. Graham placed another record on the table beside the champagne glasses. The hotel folio also shows a private notary fee charge to the penthouse suite. That notary was scheduled the morning after Mr. Morgan discovered the reservation issue. Adrian set his glass down. Graham added, and this joint credit line transfer shows $42,000 moved without Mr. Morgan's authorization to Vale Carter Hospitality Group. That changed the air completely. Affairs make people curious. Money makes them cautious. One of the investor attorneys stepped closer. Mr. Vale, was this transfer disclosed? Adrian looked at Elise. Elise looked at Adrian. That was the first crack. Adrian said, Elise handled personal financial matters. Elise turned to him. Adrian. Just his name. But inside it was panic. I had seen that look before. The moment two people who built a lie together realized there may not be enough room for both of them in the escape. Graham did not raise his voice. My client is not approving this conversion. He is requesting immediate suspension of all transaction activity, preservation of hotel records, investor communications, reservation audit trails, notary logs, and financial transfers related to Vale Carter Hospitality Group. Elise stepped down from the platform and came toward me. Her face was full of tears now, but I could not tell which ones were for me and which ones were for the collapsing deal. Caleb, she whispered, please don't do this. I looked at her carefully. Do what? Tell the truth in public after you lied in public. Her lips trembled. I was trying to build something. So was I said. For 10 years. She lowered her eyes. For a second, I remembered our old apartment. Her laptop on the kitchen table. My blueprints on the floor. Her crying because one small investor finally said yes. I remembered loving her before luxury taught her to be ashamed of the man who helped her reach it. Then Adrian spoke behind her. This is not over. I turned toward him. No, I said. But your version is. One of the investor attorneys closed his folder. Pending review, we cannot proceed tonight. The rendering of Vale Carter House still stood behind them, bright and perfect and suddenly useless. Elise stared at it like a future being removed from her hands. I did not feel victorious. That surprised me. I felt tired. But underneath the exhaustion was something stronger. Dignity returning to a place that had been stolen from it. Elise had spent months preparing to replace me with a man who looked better beside her in luxury rooms. She had never prepared to face the man whose name was still in the walls of the hotel. The rooftop reception ended without an announcement. Guests left in quiet clusters, the way wealthy people leave when they are afraid proximity might become liability. Champagne glasses remained half full. The string quartet packed up early. The covered rendering of Vale Carter House was carried away by two hotel employees who looked relieved not to be part of its future. By midnight, Graham had sent preservation letters to everyone who mattered. Adrian's investors paused funding within 48 hours. The notary cooperated. Nina kept her job after the hotel's interim management realized she had protected the property from a fraudulent transaction. Elise's assistant admitted the reservation note had been requested directly. The joint credit line transfer became part of our divorce filing. Adrian tried to distance himself from Elise first. Men like him often do. They teach people to betray, then act surprised when betrayal becomes evidence. Elise called me 14 times a week after the rooftop. I answered once. She said, I need you to understand. I was standing inside the Aurelia's East Wing, looking at the brass elevator frame my team had restored years ago. What do I need to understand? I got carried away. I closed my eyes. That phrase offended me more than anger would have. Carried away sounded like a glass of champagne too many, a flirtation, a mistake. This had been paperwork, a reservation audit, a notary, a credit line transfer, a fake spouse note, a public replacement. Elise, I said, you did not get carried away. You made arrangements. She cried then. I thought if the deal closed, everything would make sense. No, I said. You thought if the deal closed, I would have to accept what you had already done. She did not answer. That was answer enough. The divorce took 9 months. She tried to keep part of my hotel equity out of the settlement discussion until Graham placed the Bellamy agreement on the table. After that, her attorney stopped speaking in confident sentences. Vivian sent me one message. You should have handled this privately. I deleted it. People who participate in public disrespect do not get to demand private consequences. The Aurelia Grand did not become Vale Carter House. Instead, The hotel entered a preservation partnership with a group that respected its history. I did not become a hotel king. I did not want that. My equity remained what it had always been, a promise that the building would not be gutted by people who only loved luxury after it became profitable. 1 year after the rooftop, I returned to the Aurelia alone. Not for a deal. Not for revenge. For coffee. The lobby looked the same, but I did not feel the same inside it. The front desk had new flowers. The pianist played something low and familiar. Nina saw me and smiled. "Good afternoon, Mr. Morgan." No confusion. No other husband. Just my name. I sat near the window with a cup of black coffee and watched guests move through the lobby. For the first time, the hotel did not feel like the place where my marriage ended. It felt like a place that had told the truth. I thought about Elise, not with hate, but with distance. That is how healing begins sometimes. Not when the anger disappears, but when the person who hurt you becomes a fact instead of a wound. I had gone to surprise my wife with orchids and an anniversary necklace. I left with evidence, heartbreak, and the beginning of my freedom. She thought luxury could rename loyalty. She thought another man could stand in my place if the room was expensive enough. She thought my silence meant I would let the lie check in under my name. But old buildings remember who saved them. Paper remembers who signed. And dignity remembers the moment you stop begging to be recognized by someone determined to erase you. Some people do not lose you when they betray you. They lose you earlier, every time they rehearse the lie and assume your love will keep you quiet. By the time Elise finally understood who I was no longer standing in the lobby with flowers. I was walking out with my name still written in the walls.